So love bombing is sort of the hook that gets you into such a group. Now, a lot of us were born into the church, and as infants, we are 100% susceptible to love bombing. But even as adults, we are as well. Love bombing is what attracts new members to the organization, and it appeals to your ideals and values. It says we are going to change the world. We're going to make casseroles for our neighbors. We're going to make the world a peaceful place. We're going to bring Zion. That in other groups, that could be other ways that the group is going to change the world, because they're in all these groups, they're claiming to have the perfect system, and thus the perfect system will change the world. It establishes trust so that you will believe that the person who is indoctrinating you has all the truth. It creates positive mental associations with the group. So you might think those Mormons sure are nice. They wear nice clothes. They say nice things. They never swear. They're never angry. They've got a smile on their face all the time. Other groups have their own positive associations that they try to project out into the world. Again, not all of these techniques apply evenly to every single group. So some groups may not be as proselytizing active. They might not have a good PR firm behind them to promote those ideas. So it depends on the group how positive. There are some groups that you can just tell they're a cult just by looking at them, and you wonder why anyone would ever join them. But most groups are really good at making themselves look like really good people. The people are good in most cases, but the group itself is not. That's the thing though, is it's a false love. It's not genuine. It might be genuine for specific individuals who are meeting with other specific individuals, but we'll get into sort of why that breaks down even for people with the best of intentions. And that love, though, ends up being conditional on conformity. So if you join the church and you're new in the church and you can't quite quit smoking, you can't really, you leave your girlfriend or your boyfriend, but you can't really leave them for long, and you're back sleeping with them again or whatever. And then that's where the judgment comes out, and the love gets withdrawn, and you feel it. And then you're encouraged by that emotion to get back into good standing. I'm going to break down some of the words here, because I think the words that are used within Mormonism are very telling. Disfellowship is literally a feeling of isolation. You're being removed from your fellows. And excommunication is literally a failure to be heard. There's no two-way communication going on. It is just dictation. So.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about this in just a second, but I like to just bring in, just as I'm trying to make sense of everything you're saying, bring in my Mormon experiences. Mm-hmm. We'll talk about it later. But what immediately comes to mind is so many converts to Mormonism talk about how they met people in the ward. Everybody loved them, made them feel super special. Mm-hmm. The missionaries were so nice. It was like, oh, wow, I not only have these elders or these sisters that are like now my besties, now all these members are wrapping me in love with blankets and invitations, and these investigators feel like they're just loved by, coming home to this family that's always been waiting for them, to this warm hearth of freshly cooked bread and home cooked casseroles, and then they get baptized, and within, let's just say, weeks to months, it's like, where'd everybody go? Right. The missionaries are transferred. The ward has moved on, and it's not saying that people weren't sincere in all that, but there is this sort of like, man, Mormons love, I don't want to say fresh meat, but they love the convert. They love the investigator. But the investigators often feel, as I understand it, for many, they feel initially loved, and then all of a sudden, where did it all go? Is that kind of a classic example?
Exactly, because it takes a lot of effort to do all of that. Not only that, but the church puts a lot of other demands on you, which we discussed in Demand for Purity. And so you've got all these other things that you have to do. And then you've got other converts. You're supposed to save one soul, and how great your joy will be with one. Well, imagine if you get even more. And so you're encouraged to go out and make new friends and convert them as well. We also tend to base our trust on who we're going to believe based on likability. So if they're charming and charismatic, we're going to tend to think, well, they must be right. That's just a wiring deep within our brain that isn't based on rationality. They don't have to produce any proof or evidence for anything. They are just charismatic, and so we trust them. And when they give us things, whether it's a casserole or someone sweeping us off our feet, we feel that reciprocation that we talked about last time. And that inspires loyalty in us. I'm going to be with this person forever, or this organization forever. I'm going to give everything back that I feel like they've given to me. Our need for love is fundamental and universal. There might be a couple of exceptions out there, but for the most part, everybody has a deep-seated need to be liked and loved, and it's almost as fundamental to our survival as eating and breathing. This can include everything, including flattery, gifts, attention, touching, compliments, invites, listening, and sharing. Listening can be a really big one. Sometimes all we want to do is be listened to. And the love bomber is on their best behavior. You're not seeing their dark side. They're not showing you the dark side. Again, we're talking about church members. You may not have a dark side, but the organization's dark side is sort of ends up flowing through you because you're following all of their dictates, or trying to, and you just can't keep up with it. And so you do end up neglecting the new convert. And one important thing is it externalizes our self-esteem. So you become dependent upon the group to feel like a good person, to feel valuable. And so we'll talk about dependency coming up, but that's one of the things that it creates, a kind of emotional dependency. And of course, children are 100% susceptible to these. The picture is Winsaw. It's a Mormon ad from the 80s. Everybody's dressed in their 80s clothes. This is a blast right to my past. And it says, Winsaw the stranger, has a scripture reference down there. And there's a girl standing off alone, and the other girls are kind of standing together, and one's thinking about maybe talking to the girl that's alone.
Yeah, we all want to be loved. We all want to be adored. We all want to be pampered. And if somebody treats us that way, the oxytocin, all the good chemicals go into our brain, our IQ probably drops by 10 to 20 points, and we're susceptible to all sorts of undue influence. Because the mirage makes us feel so dang good, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it's a very heady experience.
Yeah, we all have experienced it, probably most of us. Yeah,
absolutely. Even just falling in love in a healthy relationship can kind of show you what it feels like. So,
yeah, absolutely.
So what happens is we get hooked on that love, and in order to get more of that, we're supposed to conform. And what happens is the group is using some different words, and they're maybe behaving a little different. They dress a little different. They green Jello or something, funeral potatoes. There's little behaviors. Most of them are fairly benign, but some of them may not be. And so what happens, so you don't necessarily have to have a commandment that says thou shalt, but we start to mimic the behavior that we see. So there's a concept in neurology called mirror neurons. And this is where when we see someone else behaving in a certain way, perhaps they're using it in monkeys, they might be using a tool. They've done a lot of these studies on monkeys. So the monkey might be using a tool, and another monkey has never used the tool before, but they're watching the monkey using the tool. And they can do brain scans and see that the monkey who is watching the activity will have neurons firing in patterns in the brain cells firing in the same pattern as the monkey who is actually using the tool. And so we're basically mirroring that behavior within our minds. We're imagining what it must be like to do that thing, and that creates the same patterns in our brain. And so we see other people behaving these certain ways, and that leads us to, we add that to our desire to be liked. And what happens is we start mimicking that behavior so we'll fit in. Well, cognitive dissonance, are we going to talk about it this week?
We did a little bit, yeah.
We'll talk about this more later. This will lead in to belief follows behavior in a bit. But when we are behaving in a way that we don't understand why we're doing it, then cognitive dissonance kicks in and says, why are you behaving that way? And the easiest way out often is to be, well, because I believe the same things they do. I don't even need a reason of why I believe the things that they do. I just must believe that because that's why I'm doing these things. I fit in, therefore I am the same as these people.
That's belief follows behavior. Yep.
Exactly.
Which
yeah.
we'll
and
talk about
we'll talk about that. Mhm. And so it becomes addicting. I put it in quotes because some people disagree with throwing that word around when it's not an actual chemical dependency. But it does sort of become a natural chemical dependency where we become willing to do increasingly extreme behaviors to maintain that feeling of love. Next slide. This is a quote by Michael Langone from Recovery from Cults, which is, he's the editor of that. It's a collection of essays and papers, which I highly recommend. He says, the apparently loving unanimity of the group masks, and in some cases bolsters, strict rules against private as well as public dissent. Questions are deflected. Critical comments are met with smiling pleas of no negativity.
Keep sweet. Keep sweet.
Exactly. And we
As
see
Warren
that
Jeffs
pattern.
used to say.
Yeah, we see that pattern in a lot of groups. Just you got to stay nice. You got to keep that smile on your face. Always be appearing to be happy, whether you are or not. That's part of how we became love bombers.
Yeah.
The next slide. So ask yourself, well, does Mormonism benefit from this particular psychological dynamic? This is from a priesthood manual in 2000. And the story, I'm going to read the quote, but the story starts out as there's a couple and the wife is LDS and the husband is a non-member. And the church is trying to figure out how to get Jack to become a member. So they plan a barbecue. And the quote goes, Jack, initially reluctant to come, was surprised and delighted with the easy, natural friendliness of the group. By evening's end, he enthusiastically supported the idea of a second party, a picnic in 2 weeks. No one said anything about going to church, but Alan Westover, who had discussed Jack's house painting project at the party, showed up on Saturday with his own ladder and came back evenings after work. 2 other men also helped several times. Later that month, when the elders' quorum had a project, Jack was anxious to help them. There's that reciprocity coming in. As the summer progressed, Jack spent more and more time with church members. There were chats about fishing rods and politics and raising children. To his wife's great joy, Jack told her one evening that he was ready to take the next step of being taught by the missionaries and joining the church. Mm-hmm. So mission accomplished.
Yeah. And it's so complicating because, you do want an organization, a culture that encourages service and kindness and acts of charity. Like, who doesn't want that? And so isn't it just so complicated that, and I'd say many of the Mormons that engage in those acts of service are doing it with sincere hearts of wanting to help people. So it's just weird how acts can be good and even people committing the acts can be well-intentioned, but all of it is working within a system of undue influence or coercion.
It's not the charity that's the problem. It's not the service. It's not the volunteer work that's the problem. It's, and we're going to talk about deception today. I think deception is the key ethical difference there. And there are some other ethical differences too that we'll talk about.
Yeah.
So the thing about love bombing and just what we were just talking about, members feel sincere, but due to church pressures, they don't have time to follow up on the friendships that end in conversion and that don't result in conversion. And I can think of a few examples from my own life where I did neglect relationships after, I started out thinking, oh, this seems like a nice friend, but I could probably convert them. And then when I didn't, I had other things to do. I was too busy. So this is an area where you can let go of guilt. Certainly healthy to take a moral inventory and to think about maybe what you've done, but don't spend too much time on it. Don't beat yourself up about it. Don't use it as a tool to reduce your energies or hurt yourself or cause yourself new trauma. The church pressured you to act this way, and this weapon was also used against you. You were also manipulated via love bombing. There's a quote from Marion Stricker. She wrote a really good book online called The Pattern of Double Bind in Mormonism. I think you can also buy a paper copy of it. I hope it's still online. And she says, whether one is born into Mormonism or not, everyone's need is for genuine human social relationships, personal, sympathetic, caring relationships, to be understood, to love and be loved.
Yeah.
That is the core. So that's the last slide on this topic.
So if you've engaged in love bombing, if you've been a missionary, if you brought people into Mormonism, whatever it is, don't beat yourself up. Like Maya Angelou likes to say, or liked to say, When you know better, you do better. Let's not spend any time beating ourselves up. Instead of having a sin model and a guilt and a shame and a deficit model and a purity model, which means a filth model, let's have a learning model where we just learn and then we do better.
Yeah, become a better person, and you're not never going to be perfect, but you can be a little better every day.